Greetings, Sentinels fans! Let's do some more lore, but this time let's do a villain. Let's dive into the pit of depravity that is Rook City, and look at its overlord, Chairman Pike. Good evening, citizen. You may or may not have been expecting this message. For your sake, I hope you're listening to this message in utmost privacy. Things would get very complicated for you if someone else were to listen in. Now, permit me some vanity. I can assure you, you might need to know some of this. The rest of it, well, permit me my fun. My name is Chairman Pike. You probably know of Pike Industries, formerly Pike Biotech. It was Jonathan Pike who founded the pharmaceutical company, and when he suddenly and tragically passed, the company passed down to me. I can already hear your gears turning. Didn't Jonathan die in the 1920s? I'll get back to that. So, here I am, holding the keys to my father's company. It was time to get to work. Pike Industries was my springboard into power, but obviously I needed more. I couldn't just have a position of power, it needed to be ubiquitous and ironclad. As the head of the main pharmaceutical provider in Rook City, I had quite a bit of clout. I made the money grow, and put more people under my sway. I brought forth advances in medicine, biomechanical, genetics, even recreational substances. I bumped up production until I made the gears never stop turning, the vats never stop filling, and the factory never ceases. With production comes money, and with money comes control. I worked to get even more control, and the easiest way was to strike a deal with the Overbrook family. The founders of the city no longer had a grasp on it. With some help from me, they won their mayoral campaign, and owed it all to me. He had his power, but only if he stayed on my leash. I also gained influence over the police, to make sure they don't interfere with my business. With the mayor and the police in my pocket, there was only one more group I needed to make the city mine. The mob. When Mickey Boyle, head of the mob, decided to make an enemy of me by killing off a bunch of my distributors, I got a little put out. Now, never let it be said that I don't look after my own. So I pulled on the strings at the mayor's office, and at police HQ. There was a raid at the mob's base that quickly escalated to a firefight. By morning, the Boyles were all dead. I approached their organization for someone to pick up the pieces and found Boris Sokolov. You may know Boris the Bear Sokolov as the leader of the organization. As far as the world at the time was concerned, he was. But like the mayor and the police, he was my pawn. My operative. It was his job to put together the organization and run it. He was my line to the underworld of Rook City. With my iron grip on the city secure, there really was only one more obstacle for me. Mortality. I had access to power, finances, and state-of-the-art medicine, but that doesn't stop the years from taking their toll. Very soon, I was going to be older than my father was when he died. I needed to do something. So I searched around. What I found was quite interesting, and it required a journey. After walking through Asia to find hidden knowledge, I was approached by a group claiming they had the answers I seek. They showed me a spot in the Himalayas, where a Chinese temple sat at the summit of a stormy mountain. I spoke to the master of the temple, an aged man of incredible knowledge and power. He spoke exactly what he could give me, long life, possibly even eternal life, but he was vague on what I was to provide on my end. He wanted me to return at a later time and provide him with knowledge as well. It sounded like he was demanding a return on an investment, but wasn't forthcoming with the particular thing he wanted. When I confirmed my acceptance of the contract, he demanded one final thing, my pinky finger, and in exchange, I got a pinky-sized vial of a strange liquid. This substance would give me the reinvigorating power I needed to remain alive for so much time. And so I returned home with this vial in my pockets. But I didn't trust the man. His price seemed vague, and he clearly hoarded power. He was not the type to share his secrets willingly, and as such, everything had a price. And I was sure that next time it was going to be much more than a single finger for a single vial. So instead of draining the liquid like a whiskey shot, I took it to my lab. It took some time and money, but I was able to at least partially recreate the fluid. It now requires a large vat to bathe in to get the same effect as the tiny vial, but I feel youthful and strong, and I don't need to rely on the sorcerer and his ancient Chinese secrets. And besides, this has led to other avenues of study with the pharmaceuticals, which means more profit for me, even if the process of keeping myself alive is costly. But on to a more relevant concern. My control over the organization was pretty hands-off. Boris the Bear was doing his job well, no need to micromanage. At least, it was until a certain vigilante who went by Blackfist came along and started tearing up the organization's business. Now, the organization has always dealt with people playing the hero. The Wraith has certainly been a thorn in the organization's side for a while, but Blackfist was a determined and stubborn little bastard. What's worse, when Sokolov confronted him, Blackfist defeated him and dropped him into the Rook City prison. I figured then that he had outlived his usefulness. I gave him his pink slip while he was behind bars. I took over the organization fully from Boris, and crafted a new identity for its leader, the chairman, the man who pulls all the strings from the shadows. As I put more focus on the criminal element, I moved away from Pike Industries. I no longer aged, so it wouldn't be a great idea to remain as the public face of the company. I have enough trouble producing the life-extending fluid without the Montgomerys demanding I share it. I still control the company, of course, just quietly. I kept the crime syndicate operating and built up what I could. My vendetta against a certain thief made it clear that the organization needed some fine-tuning. The common riffraff needed their own bosses, and the bosses needed their own overseer. At the time, that was me, but with the organization growing, I would need someone to help oversee things, as well as be a problem solver when things go awry. Ironically enough, Harry Blackfist Walker would be the one to provide me with a new operative after he deprived me of an old one. Having put his crime fighting to bed, he switched over to teaching kung fu to neighboring children. That didn't last, of course, but one of his prized students was one Sophia de Leon. This woman gained discipline and power from Mr. Walker. But when he abandoned her to the streets of Rook City, she learned cunning and guile. I watched her and became convinced that I found my new operative. I brought her in and integrated her into the organization. She thrived, taking charge of this band of criminals and becoming the new face of crime in Rook City. We were quite the team, me being the administrator and support, her being the overseer and assassin. She had enough potential that, when Mr. Walker returned, now calling himself Mr. Fixer, I gave Sophia a little bit of my fountain of youth, giving her just the edge she needed to end the old man. Such a sad old man, living his whole life in my shadow, fighting my influence the whole time, but he never saw me. He beat the bear, but that changed nothing. He built up a new generation, but that did nothing but give me a new weapon, and I killed him with his own creation. Pathetic excuse for a hero. Granted, even his death didn't seem to stick. Annoyingly, Mr. Walker came back from the dead and joined up with this new group, the Dark Watch. They are bothersome, but ultimately no different from any of the other heroes that Rook City has to endure. But how did he come back? I had my suspicions, but I couldn't be sure. I wondered if that dragon was behind it. If the sorcerer was going to come down from his mountain temple and tear at my empire. Well, regardless, the sorcerer came to me, impatient to collect on the debt I owed him. I refused to pay, but he said he had already taken my payment. Only then did I realize my operative was gone. He had taken Sophia. It was a frustrating ordeal. But if that was it, then I am free of the dragon, or at least free of his direct influence. There was still a possibility of further action. He may still think I owe him something, and I might need to be ready for him. I could already see the sorcerer's influence spread around. I did note that Sophia was making sporadic appearances, doing the bidding of the dragon. She may yet become my next big adversary. First, I needed a secure place. Something in the air makes me think that an escalation was coming in, and it was best I had a bunker to hide away in. I would also need new, more controllable tools for taking power than a city full of delinquents. I could see about playing with cloning and genetic modification to make subservient troops, but that would be a further development. The arrival of the monster from space was my signal to remove myself from the equation. Rook City took some hits, but never quite like that. And even worse things were on the horizon. So I went into the safe house and vanished from the city. And I hear that things have been interesting up there. Cosmic beings falling from the sky and turning cities to dust. I had the right idea. But now things have calmed down, at least as much as they ever do these days. And it is time to come topside. And that is where you come in. You've spent long enough listening to an old man talk. You probably understand the deal. If you are interested, you will go to a certain establishment. I imagine you know the one. Arrive there on Wednesday evening. Go alone. Speak to the proprietor for further instructions. If you are not interested, simply ignore these instructions, and of course, if any of this information gets out, I will know. And the people who know you will be the first to suffer for it. The police won't help you. The heroes can't help you. Your best option is to either comply or hide. This message will destroy itself in 1 minute. I hope to hear from you soon. Signed, Graham Pike. And as we reach the end of the narrative, I will now speak of the relevant things that don't really fit into the monologue. And I do feel I have a lot to say in this section. First off, in my opinion, Pike is kind of the perfect villain. The chairman of the organization, Graham Pike, is a bit of an enigma. He occupies this area where he can be a complete overlord of this large city, but he can also just fade into the background, where it can feel like he isn't there at all. He's a very mysterious figure, and yet he's very simple. He's just really effing greedy. He just wants to own everything, and he doesn't care how he goes about it. He doesn't create things, but does the normal rich person thing and just buys groups and keeps them running. Like he did with his father's company, and with the mob he took from Mickey Boyle. But while he wants to own everything, he's very patient with it. He doesn't rush into these things. And if things are going pear-shaped, he will happily take the L if he needs to. He can present as a physical threat, but more often he can be an intellectual threat. Additionally, his position as a CEO of a pharmaceutical company can make him a bit like the face of Big Pharma, while his leadership over all crime in the city makes him the face of the criminal underbelly. When you attack the chairman, you are attacking both Big Pharma and the mob. So you are essentially fighting the worst aspects of capitalism at both the top end and the bottom. How do you even manage that? Also, and this is a much more petty thing, but I love how much I hate his smarmy smirk. Yeah, laugh it up, big boy. I can't wait to drag you out into the open so I can hit you repeatedly. There is also the fact that, at least in the main timeline, Pike had never been truly defeated. He has taken losses and tangled with groups he probably shouldn't face, but his positioning makes him nigh untouchable and able to fade away if things get real bad. He even has immortality, which allows him to approach problems differently, thinking more in terms of the long game. If he wanted, he could pull the classic immortal move of just take a nap for a few decades, and many of your problems just die off. He doesn't, of course, probably because he's still relatively young in the grand scheme of things. But he has the option, and it might even very well be his plan in the RPG, though my guess is that he will return to form and rule from the shadows. Another thing that I find interesting about Chairman is how he affects things indirectly. Yes, he controls all crime, but he does have a huge effect on the politics of the city, the media, the economics. He's even responsible for the environment of the city with a thick smog coming from the industrial plant. Let's think about Pike's influence in terms of the decks. There is his own deck, of course, and Pike Industries, which he owns. He is the one most responsible for the condition of the city, from the pollution to the crime. There is also Spite, who came about when a death row inmate was experimented on at Pike Industries, creating this absolute horror, who would continue on to terrorize Rook City, traumatize the heroes, and even carve his way through freaking hell before becoming an agent of an evil deity and then possibly take that deity's place as a ruler of Discord. Maybe. We don't know yet. But that is a story for another day. And apparently, not satisfied with one horrifying monstrosity running around, Pike decided to make clones of Spite. Truly the best possible plan. But the consequences of Pike's existence doesn't end there. Pike Industries produces a lot of drugs, but it also produces a lot of gook. And as we can see from the rats inhabiting the factory, the sludge seems to have some nasty effects. Instead of finding an environmentally friendly way of disposing of this sludge, the company just dumps the stuff into the Rook City sewers, which is why the water is green and glowing. And when the sewer sludge mixed with this one drug dealer dude who lived in the sewers, it slowly changed him from a human into a scary rat monster. Yep, plague rat is another thing that Pike is responsible for. And that means the plague rat events can be tied to him. What's more, as we learned from Chrono Ranger, plague rat and the Ratman infection is one of the biggest contributing factors to the creation of the Final Wasteland. So yes, Graham Pike bears quite a bit of responsibility for the end of the freaking world. Jesus Christ, this guy does more damage by accident than Baron Blade ever accomplished. Man, oh man, the reach of this guy. He's like a factory for evil. And yes, I could look at the effects of this person and connect to current events. But, I don't want to. So I'm just going to say that I love punching this guy and scale back to a few more interesting tidbits. One entertaining thing is how he is treated in alternate universes. In two different timelines, Pike is killed and his empire just passes off to his killer. Sophia the Operative in the Dark Watch animated show, and the Wraith in the Iron Legacy timeline. And the fact that the death of the chairman didn't destroy the organization in both timelines is a testament to his ability to make a functioning group. Or at least one too valuable to destroy. I also wish I could have seen more of the Vertex timeline, especially with the Abandoned Tactics expansion, Broken City. As in that timeline, Rook City becomes a bit of a war zone between the Operative, who, trying to break away from Zhulong, starts trying to claim pieces of the organization for herself, while the chairman got really messed up when Oblivion nuked the city, apparently reaching far down enough to hit the chairman's bunker. He wasn't killed, but Pike did get a whole bunch of experimental chemicals into his system, so he started calling himself Exemplar and tried to take the city using a bunch of beefed up Spike clones. The influence of Pike is ever omnipresent. And going back to the main timeline, one interesting bit of lore concerning the chairman is the golden pocket watch often seen on his person. Now it is easy to think of that as a prop that exists to signify his wealth. And it kind of was, at least at first. But there is a picture of something inside the watch that Graham Pike holds valuable. Now I don't think it's been confirmed what is in the watch, and I do have to wonder what it could possibly be. The idea of this guy keeping anything for sentimental value is a bit nuts. I could see him having trophies of his victims or objects that show off his wealth and power, but not sentiment. Him just having this shows an unexpected side here. It is likely that the watch has an old picture of someone inside it. You know, the old trope of the locket with pictures of loved ones inside. The equivalent to keeping pictures of your family in your wallet. Now the only thing that I could possibly think of that he would hold dear would likely be his parents. Now that does sound odd considering that we know that he killed his father, but we don't know what their actual relationship was, nor do we know anything about Graham's mother. If I'm right, and it's his parents on that watch, then there is the tragedy of him knowingly destroying something he loved in the pursuit of a shallow goal. And if I'm wrong and it's a girlfriend or something, then he clearly didn't want to share his life or his immortality with this person. And that's its own thing. And just saying, this particular story that brings up the Golden Watch was before the Operative was brought into the organization, so she's not an option. The watch adds a kind of tragedy to him, even if it's likely a self-inflicted one. And of course this tragedy gets even worse when Ermin stole the watch from him, taking away that tiny glimmer of humanity that Pike once had, leaving behind only his greed. And now we have finally reached the end of this one. I hope you have enjoyed it. Take care, friends. Okay, I'm not certain if I'm going to be able to maintain this voice, but wasn't... Do you mind, Rabbit?